As the Switch's legacy comes to a close, it's interesting to look back at just how Sonic the Hedgehog fit into Nintendo's library here. You often hear about how the Nintendo audience is the perfect fit for Sonic. It's a cartoony platformer like Mario after all, but realistically, Nintendo has never been the place to play Sonic games. A lot of the times it's on other consoles or PC. Outside of the handhelds, of course, the DS still wins there. But for the first time ever, a Nintendo console came and went with no unique Sonic content to call its own. Okay, well, almost all, you know what I mean, dedicated Sonic games. There's not much there. Hell, at least the Wii U still has Sonic Boom as an exclusive, you know? And now we all have Sonic Racing Cross Worlds to look forward to, but let's be honest, we're going to be talking about the Switch 2 at that point anyway, comparing it to other consoles. A lot of the same stuff is going to apply, like the other games in this video, so hey, that'll be cool, but I'm moving on. But hey, that doesn't mean it's all bad. Let's take a look at everything Sonic on the Nintendo Switch, take into account the quality of the games themselves, as well as how the games run on the console, that's important too, and give them the good old classic letter ranking. That's all the rage nowadays. Sounds good? Sounds good. The first Sonic game to grace the Switch is Sonic Mania. Yeah, that's gonna be an easy S rank, right off the bat, I'm sorry. People almost forget how big of a deal it is that this released on the Switch in the first place. When Sonic Mania was first announced, no Nintendo consoles. The Wii U was still a thing, it was just PlayStation and Xbox. But suddenly, it gets a Switch version, and then the numbers on the YouTube channel for that trailer go crazy, superseding all the other consoles, and that was a pretty good sign. As far as I'm concerned, man, Sonic Mania is still the perfect 2D Sonic game. Yeah, it has a lot of old ideas, it's just a rehashing of old ideas in new ways with a few new ideas with new zones like Studiopolis, but man, I don't care. This game is still fantastic from start to finish. There's not a single moment in this game that I'm kind of about. I can play the entire thing. Even if the final zone is the least interesting of all the new zones, it's still pretty cool and ominous. I love the special stages. It's all just incredible stuff. And the soundtrack, God, the soundtrack alone releasing is just a massive shift in history right there. It's so damn good. When it came to the DLC, the Sonic Mania Plus stuff, I will admit I wasn't the biggest fan. I didn't really care either way. Having new characters like Mighty and Ray for the main campaign, that's cool, obviously, to see them back after so many years. Encore mode, though, never really clicked with me. I would just much rather play the main game over and over again. The slight differences in level design, I don't really care. Mania also goes down as the only Sonic game on Switch that is on par with the other consoles. Maybe the PlayStation, Xbox versions load a little bit faster, but there are zero compromises with this game compared to all the others. Mod support on PC aside, Sonic Mania on Switch is the definitive console version as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, S rank, easy, easy, easy. And I guess that means it's all kind of downhill from here. A few months later, we got Sonic Forces, and oh boy. I totally get it. There is a contingent of people out there who, I don't know, Sonic Forces may have been their very first 3D modern Sonic game, and they do have some nostalgia for it. You know what? More power to you. My opinion when this game first came out was scathing. Was not a fan in the slightest. This is probably my least favorite Sonic game of all time. I might even go as far as to say I might rather play Sonic 06 than Forces. I'm really on that side of the argument. But to the credit of Sega, I guess the Switch version, it's fairly competent. One thing you started to get used to around this time was that, hey, if a game is going to release on next-gen consoles as well as the Switch, expect kind of the same game but blurrier, and maybe the frame rate is in half. So the console games are 60, this game is 30. Typically, you do really want 60 FPS for a Sonic game. You want it to be as responsive as you can be, but because the level design in Forces is so garbage, it doesn't matter. It's fine. You can play 30 FPS, it's no big deal. So if you like Forces, this is a fine enough version of the game. Of one of the worst Sonic games of all time. Both this and Mania releasing only a few months apart really made 2017 just an absolute whirlwind of a year for Sonic fans. And, Nintendo fans got their first ever mainline Sonic game that released on the next-gen consoles as well as their own thing at the same time that hadn't happened before because everything else was jumping all around and Colors was a Wii exclusive. There's some merit to Forces being on Switch day and date and being all ready to go, but I don't care. D tier. That's a D tier. Next up is a pair of pretty interesting releases because these are technically Switch exclusive, even though it's just a lineup of classic ROMs like repackaged in a new way. Sega had the Sega Ages line, all exclusive to the eShop. And this lineup had a pretty strong variety there. There's like Outrun and Shinobi and Alex Kidd. The most interesting one of the bunch is probably Virtua Racing because it runs super well on the Switch. This is probably the best version of the game, and that's cool. But otherwise, you're looking at a bunch of ROMs with a new menu interface and maybe like 1 or 2 new modes. And yeah, for Sonic 1 and 2, that's exactly what this is. The window dressing with the borders are kind of neat, but otherwise this really is just the Genesis ROM repackaged to you in a brand new way. There are some new additions, like the drop dash is an option in these games. There's a ring keep mode, so if you get hit, you don't lose all of your rings, which is more of a modern Sonic thing, and I do like that, sure. They each also have a singular challenge mode where there's a time attack mode in Sonic 1, and a get 100 rings before beating the act thing in Sonic 2. The Knuckles mode is right there in Sonic 2. That's kind of cool as well. These are perfectly functional versions of 1 and 2, and if you're really into speedrunning, maybe the leaderboards will win you over, but I don't know. These seem pointless, especially once Nintendo Switch Online got the Genesis app for the expansion pack, and then of course Sonic is there as well. This all is just pretty redundant. It's an interesting little experiment that Sega had with the Sega Ages line, but I don't know. At the time they released, they would probably get a B rank, but as it currently stands, I really feel like there's no point in having these be around, so I'm gonna give them a C rank. And while we're on the topic of re-releasing the classic Genesis games, there is also the Sega Genesis Classics collection that does, once again, feature Sonic 1 and 2. You also got 3D Blast and Spinball and Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine as far as Sonic titles are concerned. I guess Flicky counts for that collection as well. And then just a bunch of other Genesis games like Rystar and whatnot, pretty cool on the surface. Any Sega Genesis collection, I would say, is a worthwhile venture. However, there is one crucial flaw here. I don't believe this is the same on the other console versions, and certainly not on the PC version, but on the Switch, there is noticeable input delay. It's really bad. Not so much that it's oh, maybe you won't notice it, maybe you will. It's pretty alarmingly bad here. If you do have the Genesis collection on Switch, load it up, and then load up the NSO collection, and you'll see it's pretty bad. Once again, not every single game it's gonna matter here. If you're playing an RPG like Phantasy Star, whatever, the input lag, fine. But for Sonic games, yeah, that's pretty bad. And besides, if you want to get subjective on this, I also already thought that the Genesis collection here is weaker than the Ultimate Sonic collection that was released on PS3 and 360 that had way more fan service. So just as a casual fan, maybe the emulation was not as strong, but it was way cooler to explore the menus at the very least. If you're looking for just a good old collection of Sega Genesis games on your Switch, this is really not the way to go. If you want to own them versus just renting them essentially with the NSO expansion pack, sure, but otherwise, yeah, if the input delay wasn't a thing, it'd get a higher ranking, but as it stands, it's pretty bad. I'm gonna give this a D. Plus, this is still in the point when Sega wasn't really acknowledging Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles, so that sucks also. There was one game that released in 2018 that featured Sonic the Hedgehog that does deserve a lot more praise, and yes, the Nintendo Switch exclusive Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Now I know it's not a Sonic game, but every single franchise in this game gets so much love and respect. I figured let's just take a look at how Sonic was treated, because right from the offset, this was a franchise that only got one remix, the Angel Island Zone song in Brawl. So fan service was already kinda low. I always felt like they could do a little bit better, and if Ultimate is the final attempt to just overload this game with so much Sonic stuff, your ears are gonna bleed. I'll admit, that didn't really happen here, and that's a little upsetting. You would immediately think that with the addition of Echo Fighters that, hey, Shadow would finally have a moment, and then no, that didn't happen. He was relegated to assist trophy once again, but we did get Knuckles as an assist trophy, so that's nice. The Green Hill Zone stage from Super Smash Bros. Brawl didn't show up in Smash 4 for Wii U, only the 3DS version, so to have that return in Ultimate, that was nice too. The Mii costumes, as always, were infinitely cursed. When it comes to the music, there were no additional remixes, though they did include stuff like Studiopolis Act 1 and Fist Bump and Sunset Heights from Sonic Forces. Okay. Considering they went back and added a bunch of Final Fantasy stuff when they included Sephiroth in the Fighter Pass, it is upsetting that they didn't try to do a little bit more with Sonic. So when it comes to all that stuff, I think similarly I would rank this a D. However, the spirits, I think, are incredibly cool, and that's gonna bump that up a little bit. having the Dr. Eggman spirit be against Roy, since he's in like a little flying mech and he wears sunglasses, like that's kind of cool. And then you also fight Metal Sonic in there, like that's pretty cool. That's a neat idea. There's a Supersonic spirit where you fight against a Sonic who has his final smash immediately. A pink inkling is Amy, who automatically gets a hammer, of course, the Pico Pico hammer. Team Chaotix with a purple Sonic as Espio, a blue King K. Rool as Vector, and the light blue Pichu that also wears goggles as Charmy. I don't know, I think these creative spirit battles are just one of Smash Ultimate's strongest points, and not enough people give them praise. I really liked going through Sonic's lineup here. His classic mode isn't all that creative. It's like a bunch of really fast characters, and then it pivots to a blue, red, and yellow Kirby, and then you fight, I guess, what's supposed to be Zavok? This is at the point where Sega was really trying to make it feel like, Zavok, you should care about this guy, I swear. And this is all on top of Sonic as a character being something that I feel like if they were to make in modern times, he would play totally differently. It doesn't feel as fan servicey as it should be when you compare it to the newer characters that were added in, but there's a whole lot of conversations to always have about Smash. But when it comes to just how Sonic and his franchise was implemented into Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, at the end of the day, I'm giving this a C. Hopefully that wasn't too convoluted, because there's a lot to go over in just a short amount of time. Back to dedicated games though, we have Team Sonic Racing, another Sonic game that releases day and date on all consoles, including the Switch, and it's okay. Doesn't matter which console this game released on, it had such unfortunate timing releasing so close to Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled. The online communities for this game on all systems, including PC, were dead on arrival, so if you wanted to play with others, your chances were pretty slim, which is extra unfortunate because the whole team-up mechanic is the whole selling point of this kart racer in particular. Going from complete Sega fan service with Racing Transformed and All-Star Racing to just Sonic stuff where, once again, they really want you to care about Zavok, I swear he's a big deal, it's definitely a whole slew of missed opportunities, but what is here is still fun. The track design is as solid as ever for the new tracks, as well as like a bunch of returning tracks from the previous games, like the Planet Wisp stages, and you get to see the Mother Wisp that was only in Sonic Colors DS. That's cool. The soundtrack in this game, incredible. Like the amount of love that Sonic Heroes gets for the soundtrack and the remixes, it's so good. Holoska with endless possibilities for one of the snow tracks, like man, this soundtrack I can go on forever about. But mechanically, you're either playing this in a 3-person mode where it feels kind of weird and you're trying to jive together with CPU characters because the chances of playing with real people, once again, pretty slim, or you're playing this as a purely single-player racing game like many other racing games out there, and then it just comes off as kinda bland, but with a really good soundtrack. The Switch version, at the very least, is competent. It once again runs at half the frame rate at 30 FPS. The load times are a little bit longer, but it's not that big of a deal. For this game, it's fine. If it had a stronger, like, online community where that stuff really mattered, then maybe. But as it stands, Team Sonic Racing is just, they made the best out of an idea, and this game should have never happened. They should have continued the Sega thing. But, you know, with that, they still made a decent game. I'm gonna give this a C. Yeah, I'm gonna give it a C. Ultimately, it's not gonna take much to say that Sonic Racing Cross Worlds is gonna be the better Switch racing game. Alright, now this definitely counts. Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020. The only people who got to participate in the 2020 Olympics, because, you know, the world happened. I think this might be my hottest take of the entire video. I actually kinda like this game quite a bit. Now, when it comes to the mini-games and looking at it as an evolution from the previous games on Wii and Wii U, yeah, there are certain points that are not great. The general slate of events is like, whatever. There's a huge lack of dream events. Like, it's so upsetting that they only have 2. There are technically 3 dream events, but one of them doesn't have a quirky fan servicey theme, so there's only 2 dream events worth caring about. That's it. Like, that's super insulting. The soundtrack doesn't hit as hard as the previous games did. Like, man, Winter and London on the Wii, those soundtracks went so hard. But the thing that really makes this game worthwhile, for me at the very least, is the single player mode. I know multiplayer is supposed to be a big deal here. It's a party sports game, so load up multiple controllers and then just go to town. But the story mode here is the right amount of just absolute stupidity that I was glued to from start to finish. Mario, Sonic, Bowser, and Eggman all get sucked into a retro video game console, and then you have like the real world where Luigi and Tails have to explore Tokyo to get everybody out of there and, you know, save the day that way. But you also go inside the video game world where you see 8-bit Mario and Bowser along with 16-bit Sonic and Eggman, and this just looks like a fairly low polished old Newgrounds cartoon, and maybe because I grew up in that era, I have such an affinity for a style like this. It's garbage. It's so garbage. Like the pixels aren't aligned with anything. It just looks so rough. The music is just this weird chiptune, like incomprehensible mess at some points, but God, because of that, I love it. I love it so much. It even comes with an entire different slate of just retro themed events, and I love that. There's like these boss battle things too, with like these chase segments and whatnot. Like, I don't know, man. It's so stupid, but I love it. I love stupid single player modes in games that otherwise don't need them. So while everything else in this game is whatever, it is like the lowest Mario and Sonic game up until this point, and who knows if there's ever going to be another one. It's all things are pointing to no. This story mode is still something special. So with that in mind, it's going to sound crazy, but I'm going to give Mario and Sonic at the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games a B. That's right, I'm giving this a B tier. Suck it, Team Sonic Racing and Sonic and Smash Ultimate. 2021 saw Sonic Colors Ultimate release, and oh boy, I'm sure the developers didn't want this remaster to come out as rough as it did, but regardless, it came out pretty rough. It is incredibly upsetting that this first Wii exclusive came out on such a botched mess on all consoles, and then on Switch, it's the worst version of them all. The once Nintendo exclusive resulted in the worst version of the remaster. That sucks, because I love Sonic Colors so much. It is one of my favorite Sonic games of all time, and to see it get treated this way, that's very unfortunate. At launch, there were a whole lot more issues than there are now, like a lot of epilepsy warnings with the lighting and stuff. Like, that's crazy that made it past the initial release, but thankfully that stuff did get patched. But what doesn't get patched is just the new ideas that didn't make sense anyway, like the Metal Sonic Racing segments and the pretty bare bones customization options for Sonic with the new coins that you're collecting throughout the adventure. For just doing like a casual run of the game, it's still fine. Once again, I do like Sonic Colors, so if you can get past these weird things like Sonic jumping in and out of frame in ways he shouldn't be because that's just a weird botch, and then the lighting engine is like infinitely worse than the original version, you know, Colors Ultimate, it's okay. I even think that the complaints for the Switch version are a little bit overdone. Like, yes, the load times, very bad. And you have 30 FPS, which, once again, not ideal. It's really not that much of a game breaker. This is still a slower game compared to some other Sonic games out there, so didn't bother me too much. And then I just got into a habit of doing something else, like looking at my phone during the loading segments, which is not a good excuse whatsoever, but I didn't hate my time with this version compared to the other consoles, but I don't know, I think I'm just coping pretty hard. Your best bet is to still play the original Sonic Colors emulated, but if you really feel like going with Ultimate, this is the weakest version, but not the worst thing ever, I would still say. I don't know, I'm gonna give it a C. I'm gonna stick with the C. Take it from someone who's a massive Colors fanboy, I'm gonna give this a C. If you're already mid on Colors, why even waste your time, I guess? And then in 2023, we saw Sonic Origins, another compilation of classic Sonic games, but they include the mobile versions of Sonic 1 and 2, the previous HD version of Sonic CD, and a brand new widescreen version of Sonic 3. The first time this company had acknowledged Sonic 3 and Knuckles in so long, thank God it's here. Now, depending on who you listen to, some people say that this was an absolute terrible job at preserving these classic games because there are issues when it comes to some of the mechanics being translated over and the fan servicey stuff. Like at launch, there were issues with like the museum soundtrack where some song titles were just playing the wrong song, and that was very weird. There was also a noticeable blur on all the pixels. There was a bilinear filtering in general with the game, and that was annoying because you couldn't turn it off, and just like right from the jump, it was made very apparent that these were going to be weaker versions than what the PC fan versions were getting, because there were already decompilations and recompilations of those versions that are still, at the end of the day, the best versions of those games. But I don't know, man, on a casual level, I think Sonic Origins is pretty damn good. The museum stuff, like, yeah, that was definitely a missed opportunity. Only having like short segments of the Sonic Symphony as unlockable videos, and the video stuff only really boils down to the cutscenes that are already in Origins, plus some of the stuff from Mania Adventures, the online cartoon. Like, that's cool, I guess. And then the Game Gear games, quite frankly, I don't really care, but just as a basic way to play enhanced versions of the classic Sonic games, I think this does a fantastic job. Yeah, also having some of the music in Sonic 3 be replaced with something that's like objectively not good, there's a lot of decisions that I would have changed about this. Like, why include the Game Gear games but not include 3D Blast? Like, that doesn't make any sense. The museum makes a point to include the soundtrack for Knuckles Chaotix. You can include 32X games now, but Okay, sure, whatever. Everything about this collection, after it's been patched, outside of the main games themselves, really not great. The presentation is kind of cool, but on Switch, the islands run at 30 FPS instead of 60. That's like the only other console difference, so whatever, not a big deal. The mission mode, okay, that's kind of whatever too. Whatever. A lot of the stuff that makes Origins its own unique thing, I don't really care about. But if you're like me, just care about the classic games, this is still a fantastic collection as far as I'm concerned. I'm gonna give Sonic Origins, and I guess by proxy, Sonic Origins Plus, so you can play as Amy, an A rank. That's right, I'm giving this an A rank. I really love Sonic Origins, all wacky BS aside. I really gotta hand it to Sega, man, because they didn't have to release Sonic Frontiers on the Switch immediately once this gameplay was shown off, and we knew it was coming to Switch. We all knew it was gonna be kinda jank compared to the others, and sure enough, that's what happened. But you know what? I guess it could be worse. This shouldn't be your primary way to play this game, but if this is your only option, it's not that bad. I really think Sonic Colors is the worst experience on this console. The fact of the matter is, Sonic Frontiers is a complete change in what you expected from a typical modern Sonic game. Having these wide open areas with these huge intimidating bosses, and then you're quickly warping to cyberspace for all these different typical kind of boost stages. It shouldn't run well on the Switch, and they had to really run the settings as low as possible to get it to do so, but it's really not that bad, all things considered. A lot of it will come down to just your general tolerance on the gameplay loop for Frontiers anyway. I love running around these areas and solving puzzles. Even though a lot of these puzzles don't have much speed, it's just basic puzzle solving, I still really enjoyed my time with this game. The atmospheric music is great, I really dug the story, the boss battles, oh my god, the boss battles are incredible. If you have not played Frontiers, I would definitely highly recommend it on anything but Switch. But if Switch is your only console, then know that you're going in for an incredibly blurry experience. You're probably better off playing this game in handheld mode because the low resolution is going to hurt a lot less on there. But realistically, if you care at all about the Switch's library as a whole, then you already know that there's this huge subset of games that are considered miracle ports, like games you just wouldn't think would run on the Switch at all, but by God, they figure out a way, games like Doom Eternal and The Witcher 3. And even though Sonic Frontiers released day and date on all the other consoles, this kind of feels like that too. The Switch version is an incredibly cool novelty, and if you're a hardcore Sonic Frontiers fan, you can at the very least try out the demo and see that it actually does kind of run on this console. But given just how much they had to compromise for this game, I'm still going to give it a C. I would give the proper Frontiers experience on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC an A, but for the Switch version, it's still kind of neat. A C, I think, is justified. But then we got a Sonic game that needed barely any compromises when it comes to the Switch version, Sonic Superstars. The only core difference with this one compared to other consoles is once again, maybe the load times, but otherwise a lower resolution. Not a huge deal when this game moves as fast as it does. The texture quality is noticeably worse, but only if you directly compare the two. That's fine, like whatever. Realistically, this is one of those things that when you're playing this game on its own, and as far as Sonic Superstars itself is concerned, opinions are all over the place for this game, but I really like it. I love how this game looks, I love how the game plays, and even though like the first half of this game, when it comes to zones, yeah, they are new zones, but the themes are pretty derivative. Didn't matter to me, man, it's still just a nice, fun Sonic game. This is the first time in a long time they made a brand new Sonic game. They had a vision, they set out to complete it, and they did so. Whether or not you really like a lot of those decisions, like the 4-player mode where the game is very clearly built around that, for things like the boss battles that take a lot of waiting before you can take in your next hit, then sure, those arguments can be made. But in general, I've already played through Superstars a bunch of times with multiple different characters, and even though yes, there are a ton of problems, like, man, the final boss fight, terrible. The final boss fight with Knack, also terrible. The way the game handles these weird acts where there's like one unique act for each character and then you decide if you want to play that act or not in the main campaign, like it's a neat idea, but I do think it's kind of strange. Like, yeah, a lot of strange decisions with this game, but as a core basic Sonic experience, I really like this. I'm gonna forget to talk about the multiplayer mode of this game because I think everyone has. That's one of the biggest throwaway modes in Sonic history. The soundtrack could be better. The 4-player co-op mode I think could have been polished a little bit more because it doesn't really feel like it works for a Sonic game. One character's always going way too fast. But I don't know, man. I still really like Sonic Superstars. I'm gonna give this a B. It's probably a lot of nostalgia for me. As a primary Nintendo fan, this came out right at the same time Mario Wonder did, so I was kind of in platformer heaven, but I don't care. I never claimed to be not biased. Superstars is good. Moving on. And then we have the latest and arguably greatest game of the whole bunch, Sonic X Shadow Generations. Now when it comes to this game's release on PlayStation and Xbox and PC, some of the hype is dwindled because the Sonic Generations part, that game already released on all those consoles. And on PC, the launcher was terrible. So this was simply a way to get a 60 FPS version on all those systems, fix the launcher on PC, bada bing, bada boom, okay. But on Switch, this is the very first time a Nintendo console gets the base generations experience. We're not counting the 3DS version here. And yeah, it does also run at 30 FPS, very similar to the PS3 and 360 versions. However, the load times are alarmingly quick here. Like, it's crazy just how fast these stages load compared to Sonic Colors Ultimate on the same console. It's bonkers. And yeah, Sonic Generations, still a fantastic game. It does show a bit of its age here with the level design not really being as in tune for speedrunning as Shadow Generations does, which we'll talk about in a second, but having this game on the Switch, being able to take it with you, it is better than the previous console versions of the game. The drop dash, pretty unnecessary, all things considered for Sonic's portion, but hey, whatever. Good to have this on the Switch now. But Shadow Generations, like, oh my god, this game is incredible. Immaculate level design. The implementation of all these different moves that Shadow has in his arsenal are so fantastic. White space here is like a better single open zone than any of the islands in Sonic Frontiers combined. It's so damn good. And when it comes to the Switch version, yeah, it's really good. It does run at 30 FPS, and the funny irony in that is that if you play this game on PS4, yeah, the Shadow portion also runs at 30 FPS on that console too. Just a funny little trivia nugget right there. And yeah, like most other high-speed Sonic gameplay, having it at 30 FPS, not ideal, but the polish is so incredibly high that if this were your primary version of the game, I don't think you're going to notice all that much. The graphical fidelity didn't really have to get knocked down all that much. It still looks really good. It's just the 30 FPS you got to concern yourself with here. Of course, with this game and every other game on this list, once again, the Switch is never going to be the perfect way to play these games. The other consoles, when it comes to pure fidelity, are going to be better. If you care about mods, PC is going to be the way to go. But on Switch, this is probably their best showing yet when it comes to a proper modern Sonic game. So Sonic X Shadow Generations on Switch specifically, I'm going to give it an A. It gets an S on other consoles, but on Switch, I think an A makes sense. Sonic on Switch, not really much of a unique lineup, but not a bad lineup either. Having Sonic Mania, having Sonic X Shadow Generations, having Sonic Origins, having neat versions of Sonic Frontiers and Team Sonic Racing, having the hilarity of Mario and Sonic 2020, I think this console had a pretty solid showing for the Blue Blur. And there's only one thing left to talk about, the Sonic skin pack in Minecraft. Oh god, it's bad. Minecraft skin packs notoriously already run incredibly janky. Some are better than others for sure, but this one, on any other console, including PC, is already rough. You play as Sonic in a first or third person way, doing these weird speedrun gauntlets over and over again. It's very much not that great. You're mostly playing it for like the fan service and the hub world. Like, that's cool. Shadow's motorcycle is there. The music is cool. Neat. On Switch, this runs like absolute ass. Like, oh my god, they really don't care in the slightest. People give Pokemon a lot of crap for being one of the most profitable franchises on the planet and not making a really polished game, but Minecraft, I don't know what the excuse is for this. The games already look like this. They couldn't make it run kinda decently too. It's bad. It is so bad. If Sonic Speed Simulator from Roblox showed up on Switch, then maybe we'd have a different conversation here, but as far as Minecraft is concerned, oh my god, this is one of the worst things I've ever seen in my entire life. We're going to give Sonic Minecraft an F tier. The Sonic Unleashed E tier right there. There you go. I think that wraps up Sonic on Switch beautifully. Jesus Christ. Gerald Robotnik was right.